I'm just trying to coach my players with the idea that I have, and I said that many times. This is the fun part. If he's doing just to win the game or to play in the 4-3-3, I was not here. They ask me before I have here, can you play in this system? I will say I will do my system no matter what.
In my mind, it's always been there, the ability to be flexible with systems. I think the players already have enough intelligence, enough footballing culture to understand why we use it, what benefits and positives it brings.
Ruben Amorim and Xabi Alonso might share the same tactical roots, but right now, their careers couldn't be further apart. One is struggling to get Man United going, the other is making Real Madrid look unstoppable. And the crazy part? They're both disciples of the 3-4-3. So why is Alonso thriving while Amorim looks stuck? And what can Amorim learn from Alonso? When you think about Ruben Amorim, what stands out the most is how his system completely changed Sporting. Before him, they were always in the shadow of Benfica and Porto, never quite able to put a proper run together. Then Amorim arrived, and with his 3-4-2-1 setup, he built a structure that gave Sporting both balance and identity. The wing-backs stretched the pitch, the midfield double pivot controlled the game, and the two attacking midfielders behind the striker provided Sporting with constant creativity. It was compact defensively, but explosive going forward. In short, the system was the reason they suddenly looked like a team capable of competing with anyone. And the results proved it. In his first full season, Sporting won its first league title in 20 years. That was already monumental, but Amorim added the Portuguese League Cup and the Super Cup to complete a treble. For a club that had waited 2 decades for this kind of dominance, it felt like a revolution, and it was built entirely on Amorim's tactical blueprint. But the key point here is that it wasn't just a one-time success. He kept refining the same 3-4-2-1, and by 2023-24, Sporting were champions again. Last season, they started with 10 straight wins, led the league for goals scored, and also had the best defensive record. Amorim himself picked up Liga Portugal Manager of the Month for August, September, and October, proof that his system was not only working, it was overwhelming the competition. Even in the Champions League, Sporting were fearless, taking that same structure and using it to beat teams across Europe. All of this momentum made Amorim the obvious choice when Man United came calling in November. He didn't just bring trophies with him, he brought a tactical system that had delivered results year after year. But while Amorim was proving his 3-4-2-1 could dominate in Portugal, another coach was showing the exact same shape could be taken to an even higher level. That coach was Xabi Alonso, and what he did at Bayer Leverkusen changed the way people look at this system. When he first arrived, the club wasn't in great shape. They had talent, but they lacked structure. Alonso fixed that almost immediately, and like Amorim, he did it through a clear system, a 3-4-3 that gave his players both freedom and discipline. The turning point came in his second season. That's when Leverkusen delivered one of the greatest campaigns German football has ever seen. They won the Bundesliga without losing a single league game. Think about that for a second. In a league with Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund, Alonso's Leverkusen went unbeaten. And this wasn't just defensive football or grinding out results. They were dominant, attacking, and consistent from start to finish. It was the first Bundesliga title in the history of the club, and it came because Alonso had built a system that got the very best out of every player on the pitch. But the story didn't end with the league. In that same season, Leverkusen reached the Europa League final. That showed Alonso's system wasn't just effective in Germany, it worked against Europe's best as well. It proved this wasn't a one-off fairy-tale run. His tactical ideas had real substance. Then came his third season, which turned out to be his last in Germany. This time, injuries hit his squad hard, but here's where you really see the strength of Alonso's coaching. Even with players missing, he kept the team competitive. They finished second in the league, and in his final game against Mainz, they set a new record for consecutive away games unbeaten. That consistency, even under pressure, showed that Alonso's system was more than just tactics, it was an adaptable framework that could survive challenges. By the end of that season, Alonso had nothing left to prove in Germany. He had won Leverkusen their first league title, taken them deep into Europe, and left behind a team respected across the continent.
That's how Xabi Alonso made Leverkusen champions.
Deutsche Meister! That's when he made the move to La Liga, stepping up to a bigger stage with the same flexible mindset. So now we've got two coaches, Amorim and Alonso, both built on a 3-4-3 system, both successful at their previous clubs, and both stepping into bigger jobs. But here's the catch. One of them is already thriving, while the other is struggling to get started. Why is that? Before we talk about it, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you. Now, here's where things get really interesting. We've got Amorim, who dominated in Portugal with his 3-4-2-1, and Alonso, who made history with the same shape in Germany. Both of them left their comfort zones. Both of them stepped into bigger challenges. But right now, their realities couldn't look more different. Let's start with Xabi Alonso. In Madrid, he's picked up exactly where he left off. 3 games into the league season, his side has a perfect record, 9 points out of 9, and they already sit 2 points clear of their biggest rivals. His team has scored 6 goals, conceded just 1, and the structure looks balanced. Alonso's ideas are translated straight away, which is why people are already talking about Madrid as title favourites. Now look at Amorim. 3 games in, Manchester United have managed just 1 win, a draw and a loss. That's 4 points from 9. Instead of leading the way, they're already 5 points behind Liverpool. It's not just the results either, it's the way they've looked on the pitch. United finished 15th last season, so everyone expected Amorim to bring stability quickly. Instead, his side still feels uncertain, as if they're forcing a system rather than naturally flowing within it. So you've got one manager who's made an instant impact in La Liga, and another who's struggling to establish control in the Premier League. Both came in with the same tactical background, both had success at their old clubs, and now only one is thriving. And the reason for that difference? It comes down to one key thing: flexibility. Alonso has shown it from day one, while Amorim has stuck rigidly to what worked in Portugal. Flexibility versus rigidity. And if you break down how both managers started at their new clubs, it's crystal clear. Let's start with Amorim at United. The moment he walked in, it was obvious he wanted to transplant his sporting system straight into Old Trafford. No adjustments, no compromises, just copy and paste. His very first game told you everything. He lined up with Evans, De Ligt and Mazraoui as a back 3. Rashford was thrown up front as a central striker, and Ahmad plus Dalot were asked to function almost like wing-backs. In midfield, it was the same story. At Sporting, Amorim thrived with Ugarte and Pedro Gonçalves, controlling the centre. At United, he tried to mimic that by pairing Casemiro with Eriksen, hoping they could replicate that dynamic. But the problem? They're completely different profiles. Casemiro isn't the same kind of progressive destroyer that Ugarte was, and Eriksen does not bring the same box-to-box energy Gonçalves does. The end result was a midfield that looked forced, uncomfortable, and completely out of sync. And it didn't stop there. Bruno Fernandes, United's most creative player, was shifted deeper into midfield just to make the shape work. Amad Diallo, who should be developing as a wide attacker, got used as a wing-back. And Mainoo, one of the brightest young midfielders in Europe, found himself sidelined because the system didn't really have a natural spot for him. Basically, instead of building around the talent he had, Amorim tried to hammer everyone into positions that didn't fit. That's what I mean by a system-first mindset. The system ruled everything, even if the players didn't match. Now compare that with Alonso at Real Madrid. When he arrived, right before the Club World Cup, he could have easily walked in and said, "This team is going to play my Bayer Leverkusen 3-4-3. But he didn't. He understood that Madrid is not Leverkusen, and you can't just impose a one-size-fits-all structure. Instead, his very first game against Al Hilal was a simple 4-3-3. Why? Because it played to Madrid's natural strengths: Vinicius and Rodrigo wide, with the midfield controlling the game. And then he experimented. That's the key word with Alonso: experimentation. He tested a 4-1-2-3 at times, adjusting roles so that everyone, even someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold, had the flexibility to step into midfield in possession. Against RB Salzburg, he switched to a 3-5-2, and Madrid looked brilliant, winning 3-0 with extra balance and vertical runs. Against Juventus, he even tried the classic 3-4-3, but in a way that gave Vinicius, Mbappe and Rodrigo the freedom to rotate as a fluid front 3. The point is, Alonso didn't lock his players into uncomfortable roles. He adapted the system to the squad. If a shape wasn't working, he moved on. If certain players needed more freedom, he gave it. That's why he was able to integrate stars like Vinicius, Mbappe and Rodrigo seamlessly, while also finding roles for rising talents like Arda Güler. Every experiment wasn't just random tinkering. It was testing, observing, and then fine-tuning the structure to make sure Madrid's strengths were maximized. So when you put Amorim and Alonso side by side, the contrast couldn't be sharper. Amorim, rigid, system first, trying to mold United into Sporting 2.0 even if the players don't fit. Alonso, flexible, player first, shaping Madrid's system around the squad instead of the other way around. And in modern football, that flexibility isn't just an advantage, it's almost a requirement if you want to succeed at the very top. If there's one lesson Amorim has to take on board right now, it's this. He has to put the players first and the system second. At Sporting, his 3-4-2-1 worked because the squad was built specifically for it. But at Manchester United, trying to force the exact same system on a completely different group of players has only created problems. What he needs is flexibility, and there's already a clear solution. Instead of sticking to a rigid 3-4-3, Amorim could move into a 4-3-3 or a 4-1-2-3 that shifts into a back three when United are in possession. That way, he keeps the structure he likes, but adapts it to the qualities of the squad. Here's where Casemiro becomes crucial. If he drops into the backline during build-up, the entire shape changes. And this is exactly what could have presented what happened against Fulham. After that game, Marco Silva said Man United's midfield was too easy to manipulate. All it took was the striker dropping deeper into the midfield, and suddenly the midfield too were overloaded. The problem was that the central centre-back was never comfortable stepping into those spaces, so Fulham had a free man almost every time. But imagine Casemiro as part of that back three. The moment the opposition striker drops, Casemiro can step out with him naturally because it's his job anyway. That completely shuts down the overload and gives United more control in central areas. It also means the two other centre-backs aren't being dragged into uncomfortable positions, and United don't get exposed in transition. This one adjustment alone makes the team harder to manoeuvre, as Silva put it. On top of that, Amorim could finally unlock players like Diogo Dalot. Instead of being pinned wide, Dalot could invert into midfield alongside Mainoo. Think of what Trent Alexander-Arnold does at Madrid, a hybrid role that strengthens the midfield without sacrificing width when needed. Dalot has the technical quality and press resistance to do it, and Mainoo alongside him creates balance. And this is where the attack comes alive. Bruno Fernandes is no longer stuck deeper as a central midfielder. He can push higher into the pockets where he's most dangerous. Wide players like Amad or Mbeumo aren't trapped as defensive wingbacks, but instead get freedom to attack 1v1. And the striker, whether it's Cunha, Šeško or Zirkzee, finally has the space to move between the lines without being suffocated by a rigid structure. Defensively, this system still gives Amorim options. Out of possession, United could easily drop into a compact 4-4-2, which immediately adds stability and makes them much harder to break down. The key here is adaptability, a shape that bends to the situation rather than one that stays rigid no matter what. And beyond tactics, there's another big benefit. Players actually get to stay in their natural positions. Mainoo plays regularly in midfield instead of being sidelined. Amad is used properly as a winger, not wasted at wingback. Competition in the squad suddenly makes sense again. Cunha can fight for the left-sided role with Mount. Shaw returns as a natural left-back, while Amad and Mbeumo battle for the right wing. The balance of the squad improves and players are no longer sacrificed just to fit into one strict template. So the lesson for Amorim is simple. His sporting blueprint doesn't need to be thrown away, but it has to evolve. Use Casemiro in the back three, invert Dalot into midfield, push Bruno higher, and let players play where they are most effective. That way, not only does the system improve, but the entire squad becomes sharper through real competition. But what do you think? Can this United squad play better with a 4-3-3 or even a 4-1-2-3? Well, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our last video. Thank you.